Welcome to the CU 2.0 podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the CU 2.0 podcast with big new ideas about credit unions and conversations about innovative technology with credit union and fintech leaders. This podcast is brought to you by Quillo, the real-time loan syndication network for credit unions, and by your host, longtime credit union and financial technology journalist Robert McGarvey. And now, the CU 2.0 podcast with Robert McGarvey.
Agentic AI, you've heard about that. What's it mean? Google's Gemini explains what it means, and I quote, Agentic AI represents a shift from AI that simply talks to AI that does. While previous iterations of AI were primarily reactive, answering questions or generating text when prompted, Agentic AI systems are proactive. They can reason, plan, and execute multi-step tasks autonomously to achieve a specific goal. Close quote. Sound good? Indeed. That's why Agentic AI is the hot topic in AI today. And the news now is credit unions can have it. On the show are Abhishek, Chief Product Officer at Eltropy, and Kent Lugrand, CEO at InTouch Credit Union, an $800 million institution. Lugrand is a past CU 2.0 podcast guest. That show ranks him high among the best filed. There's a link to it in the show notes. Today he's here to explain why he wanted to be an early adopter of this technology and explains it in candid detail. Abhishek, meantime, is on the show to explain the Eltropy tool and to offer details on the Eltropy Safe AI framework, because safety is the key to persuading credit unions to deploy this technology now. Listen up. And what got you interested in Agentic AI?
Efficiencies and the potential of being able to serve more people without necessarily all of the cost, both direct and indirect, that it comes with serving members. Just the training, the consistency, the turnover, it's a lot. It's an awful lot. And in fact, I was talking to the dean of the Southwest Kingdom Management School earlier in the week, because I've got 3 officers that are getting ready to go to her school for the next 3 years to get training. And I've sent quite a few employees through their current employees and ex-employees that are going on to bigger and brighter things. And she thanked me for being a sponsor of the school and said, you know, you've sent a lot of graduates our way and so forth. And I said, well, it all goes back to, I was at a conference with Mark Severate, probably 2 or 3 years ago, and a fellow CEO was lamenting about the number of execs that we've trained that are no longer working for us. And I said, well, if you look around Dallas, there's in almost every credit union, there's a C-suite employee that used to work for me at some point in time.
And that's something to be proud of, because Jim Blaine will talk to you about how many CEOs he put in other credit unions.
Yeah.
That's one of the things he's most proud of in his career.
Yeah, me too. But one of the things Mark asked is, someone said, well, you know, I'm spending all this money in making this investment on employees and they're leaving. He said, you know, he was lamenting about investing in employees and leaving. And Mark Severate asked the opposite question. He said, what if you don't invest in employees and they stay?
That's a good question.
And the room just kind of got silent, and everybody said, ooh, you're right. It is table stakes. We really don't have an option but to invest in them. So, in fact, I'm getting ready to write an article for her on that, because for our industry to survive and be successful, we have to embrace this change. And agentic AI is just the next evolution of change.
So tell me about what is your agentic AI product? I mean, that's I'm sure you know better than I. That's a big term. It can encompass almost anything.
Yes,
nowadays.
yes. Agentic AI is a big, heavy term. It is a term which is taking the industry by a storm. A lot of experiments have been done. A lot of new, interesting innovation is coming out of here. I think if to keep things simple to begin with, the word agentic is to be looked at, right? Agentic means something which has agency in it, right? And so what is happening as AI is getting smarter, right? We first saw the generative stage of it, where it's able to produce responses, either in terms of artwork or in terms of text. When you ask a question, now it's able to actually do things. It's able to reason and able to, when it gets a non-deterministic input, and able to assess that and actually do things. And that's the next frontier, where for it not just to answer questions, but to able to execute things. So let me kind of bring it into context of how this works for us, for our dear customers. So, for example, when we have AI voice bots, so when customers call, say ITCU, their members call them, the AI voice bot picks up, answers the questions. And the questions could be very simple. It could be, hey, what's my routing number, which I want to use to wire money, or it could be simply like an account balance. And there are sequence of steps which product does to go get that data. And those sequence of steps is not just answering the question, reading from a document like the routing number. But when you ask for an account balance, it has to take those sequence of steps based on the processes outlined by the credit union. And the steps would be, hey, I need to first authenticate this member, understand who this member is. Second, once it's done that, then it has to go to the relevant system within the back office technologies and figure out which system has this data. Normally, this data exists in the core systems. So it has to go pull that data out of the core system, figure out the relevant account. It has to provide the data back, and then compose all that response and provide that back to a member. So it's a very simple request, but for AI, it requires a series of actions. And those actions are the tasks it performs based on the input. That's what agency is. That's what agentic AI means at its very simplest form.
I remember hearing 3 to 5 years ago when people were saying the next evolution of the web, of online, would be not telling me how to do it, but doing it for me.
Right.
And this is that generation that's come, this AI fueled generation.
But it's the beginning steps of that generation.
You can't, I mean, you don't remember, and I don't remember taking baby steps, but this is baby steps.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
That's true.
Now, how do you make the credit union comfortable with the idea that, okay, I say to the agentic AI tool, pay $500 to American Express tomorrow. How does that tool know it's me?
Well, that's a great question because, first of all, we would have to give it the ability to be able to do that on your behalf. But the first biggest step, especially when you're dealing with any member issue, is authentication and making sure that we validate who you are. And that is trust factor is absolutely minimally required to move forward. And so, and it's no different than talking to a human. When you call up and reach one of my contact center employees, there is a series of questions that they ask you that only you should know to kind of authenticate who you are and the fact that you should have access to that information. Well, the agentic AI doesn't do anything any different. It makes certain that it knows and confirms exactly who you are before it is allowed to proceed to do anything that we allow it to do. And so ultimately, the question becomes within our space, what do we feel comfortable in a secure environment letting the AI to do, that agency allowing what we want it to do and what we don't want it to do.
Abhishek, run down the key tasks that your agentic AI can do today at a credit union.
Yes. So a couple of things. Let me zoom back out a little bit on the framing of this. You mentioned baby steps, right? So when babies take their first steps, and I remember my daughter growing up, and so she had a walker, like one of those walkers where you put them in and they walk around and they don't fall, right? So think of environment or framework, which we call the Safe AI framework, being that, right? It's enabling, giving the agency, but making sure that you have guardrails in place, right? And that's what we are intending to do. So as Ken just talked about, these processes, these are established. How do you actually have the agency provided to AI to decipher the input which the users or the member is asking for, and then convert that into a series of tasks, execute them, and reliably provide the response back. Now, fast forward to Robert, your question regarding what tasks. So today, a whole variety of tasks are executed, right? Where basically when Eltropy systems are integrated with the credit union's ecosystem, where the core systems, et cetera, now when users call, they can actually look up information. They can actually, in some cases, transfer account information. Now we're pushing the boundaries on that and saying, how do we make the member experience better and better? So I'll give a couple of examples. So let's say if a member calls in and says, I want to change an address, or I want to request reversing a ATM fee, which I was charged because I'm a member in good standing and I've been a loyal member. So normally when they would call, in most typical cases, it requires handing off to a human, and they have to wait for that, right? And let's say if they're calling over a weekend, or sometimes where the humans are not available, they have to wait for the next logical time to go do it, right? Now we're pushing the boundaries on agentic AI and saying, how do we actually enable agentic AI to actually do this? And that results in a faster turnaround, much better member experience, and delivers efficiencies for the credit union, right? So that's where we are starting to take a whole host of these use cases, which would normally get handed over, but we're looking at them as low-hanging fruit to go execute on that, right? So ATM fee reversal, just changing address, even going further in disputing a transaction. So we are on that journey, back to your baby steps point, we are on that journey to go take these use cases one by one and try to solve it in a meaningful way, in a safe way, and also know when is appropriate time to actually hand it off to an expert because that situation demands it.
And keep in mind that the information that we're asking our agentic AI agent to provide it consists of both public and private information, but it's information designed to make their lives easier. So the public information could be, where's the closest branch to me? What's your routing and transit number? What are your hours? Those sorts of things. So being able to in a conversation format, provide that information, especially considering that InTouch Credit Union has members that live in all 50 states and over in a couple dozen foreign countries. It's extremely important that we are able to provide that kind of information and provide it in a 24/7, 365 format where I can serve members without having to staff three shifts of employees. And so, but we are in those baby steps, as Abhishek said, to be able to, with valid authentication and security verification, being able to provide some of those use cases that do represent those, we'll call them low-hanging fruit items that don't represent a ton of risk to the credit union, but provides a valuable service to members.
Now, is it true to assume that because of your membership heritage, EDS and HP, that your members have a degree of comfort with technology, with new technology?
I would say it's fairly okay to assume that. However, the biggest challenge is that, in the last 10, 15 years, the amount of technology in the banking sector has changed, 50-fold. And our member base, even though it started as EDS and HP, has expanded quite a bit beyond that. But I have a sneaky suspicion that, kind of like moths to a flame, those particular consumers that like technology, that like innovation, that want to be able to serve themselves, have a tendency to be more attracted to institutions like ours than otherwise. But that would be a very fair bet to guess, Robert, that our core membership definitely has an appetite for technology usage and technology adoption. that is beyond that of the average U.S. consumer.
Because I've talked with some credit union CEOs, not really big institutions, where they say, "Oh, our members will never accept AI." The members will accept AI. I assure you of that. But I can perhaps agree that some institutions, the membership is not ready for that just now, whereas
I would
yours should be.
I would agree with that, but it's just like everything else, you know. At one point in time, there was almost a Blockbuster on every corner, you know, and there were those that said, you know, I'll never sign up for streaming services. And lo and behold, Blockbuster isn't here and Netflix is huge. I mean, technology adoption and tends to follow that critical mass of all of a sudden it gets to a level where everyone is using it, and humans are so funny, no one wants to be left out. The fear of being left out is pretty huge, and so all of a sudden you get this massive amount of adoption. Some of it is triggered by external forces like the pandemic. Others are triggered by some other reason, but uh, I've lived long enough to know that evolution does tend to happen.
Well said, Ken. I mean, in my experience, I've been building products for nearly 3 decades at this point, and I've seen a lot of these transformations and adoptions. And what I feel is there are these two things which are moving equally fast, where the technology is evolving faster and faster, and the user awareness is evolving, and especially with AI. And people are interacting with them in different shapes or forms, right? So they may not be comfortable today having a conversation, but then they're using it in other places. So these things tend to cross-pollinate in their awareness and technology evolution, and there comes an inflection point where it actually meets. And in fact, we actually pay a lot of attention to this, especially when members call in. We pay attention to what voice they are talking to, what accent it has. Is that appropriate for that membership in that particular region? We're also looking at things like tone, tenor, and emotion in the conversation. If somebody's calling in and they sound angry, we want to be able to decide what to do with them and understand when to actually bring in a human in that conversation. So technology will evolve further and further, and we will get to that point where we meet that confidence. And I think it's technology's responsibility to get there.
And I know I'm dating myself, Robert, by sharing this information, but I remember my very first job in banking. I was a senior in high school in 1976. And I had to, in my job, I was working for Union National Bank in Wichita, Kansas, which eventually became a division of Bank of America, I believe. But my very first job was to convince our customers back then to try this brand new thing called an ATM card and to use an ATM machine. That was my very first job. We were giving away blenders and toasters and toaster ovens and things of that nature, all trying to get members to try this brand new delivery device called an ATM and to sign up for this card that I was willing to. That part of my job was to talk them into trying this new service.
I remember when ATM cards rolled out in First Interstate Bank, which was the place I banked at the time. An employee went out with you to the machine and showed you how to use the machine.
Absolutely. That was me. That was me.
And I still remember that. And I was so delighted. Man, I can get money anytime, 24/7. This is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember doing it for my mom. My mom was deathly afraid of technology. And I got her an ATM card. In fact, it was so funny. She was almost afraid to touch it. But we put it in and we put in her code and she got our money and she said, "Is that all there is to it?" I said, "Yep, that's it." You know, then off she went. And so, you know, fast forward, believe it or not, that still is a natural human component today. That, you know, there's, you know, being somewhat afraid of it, but once you're introduced to it and you realize the benefits, all of a sudden the benefits outweigh the fears that you had, and off you go.
Now, Abhishek, how long does it take a credit union to go live with your agentic AI?
Good question. And I think we think of it in two buckets. So for a few years now, one of the key products we have been providing is the front customer-facing, member-facing AI agents. These come in form of chat agents or voice agents, right? And we've been in that, and we have actually deployed that for multiple credit unions. When somebody calls in, these agents actually provide the answers or simple answers to simple queries. And that's once purchased, once integrated, that takes from a few weeks to a month or so to go live, right? And a big part of that implementation process is not just to integrate, but more to tune these agents to be the trusted, branded, member-facing personas, right? Majority of our customers actually give that a name, and they actually have an entity that's part of their branding. So we go through a process of selecting a brand, selecting a persona, selecting a voice which actually fits that. They can come up with a name, and that's what is bulk of that process. And then fine tuning the knowledge this agent has, right? Because every credit union has a different set of documentation, different set of processes, very tailor-made to their business and their members. So we actually go through that whole process and learn that knowledge and inform that agent and make sure that it operates within the confines of that knowledge base and then and the related SOPs. That's what we do to get that live. Once that is live, it starts to actually handle some basic tasks like looking up information, for example, looking up account information using authentication. But then we build on more and more tasks, which comes from adding additional workflows within the system. And that's the journey we are at right now, where we are opening up additional workflows. And with the examples I gave you, like address change or ATM fee reversal. And that's an ongoing thing. And our plan is to make our customers like ITC completely self-sufficient and give them an ability to enable these workflows one by one as they see fit for their business, right? Once they look at the interactions that members are having and understand, oh, XYZ is a pain point. For example, Kent and I were talking about the other day, if somebody calls in for a 1099 because it's tax filing season, right, and they really need to have it, and that's a workflow they can enable, they should be able to go to our system, enable that workflow, connect the dots, and with the right system to pick it up and write back to the right core system when this transaction is taking place. And so that's the pathway we're going in. So first step is to enable that front-facing trusted branded agent, which knows enough about the credit union. Second is to set up these workflows. And then third is to keep adding it in a self-serve basis.
Well, and there's a one big component when it comes to time, Robert, when you asked about how long it takes to implement, it is because from a credit union standpoint, what's important to me is that it not only works as designed, but it also protects us as well. So we test and test and test and test and test and test and test every single solid scenario to make sure that we're not exposed from everything from protecting PII information to cybersecurity to having the system being up and down to everything else. And so because you're for credit unions, I believe you're only as good as your last experience and your last transaction. And so it is, especially with new technologies, it is extremely important that they work the way they're supposed to. They work as intuitively as they're supposed to. And they do not create any sort of downsized exposures that could hurt the credit union brand or hurt our reputation. So, Eltropy and the Abhishek team may come up with a solution that takes 3 weeks to do, but we may take 3 months to implement it because we're going to test it and test it and test it to make certain that it will work the way it's designed.
Now, Kent, why did you say yes? I'll be an early adopter. And I ask because many credit union CEOs would rather get root canal this afternoon than be an early adopter of technology. Well, I mean, once you've done it, you're the guinea pig. Hey, Kent says it works great. Sure, I'll sign me up.
Well, believe it or not, that happens more than you think. My experience, I've been in this industry for a long time, and there are a lot of CEOs that I know that, including me at times, we don't mind being number 15 through the door.
Exactly. I'd rather be number 15.
Yeah. But But a lot of that depends on, but I think you have to weigh that against staying relevant, being able to compete against the market, and being able to serve your members. We do a membership survey to our members every year, and we ask them, who else do you do business with besides us? You have to go down to number 11 on our list before you get a non-large financial institution. And number 11 is typically USAA, who is large in their own right. You have to get down to number 17, 18, or 19 before one of our members is doing business with another credit union. Most of our members have accounts with 2, 3, 4 financial institutions, and it's us and Chase, us and Wells, us and B of A, us in Citi, us and so that's who my competition is. If I'm going to effectively compete with them and not just based on price, then I have to pick and choose where I can be relevant, where I can be competitive, and where I can make a difference with them. And to be able to do that, you cannot wait until you're number 15 all the time. So you have to choose your battles. And so in this particular instance, because I do have members in all 50 states and a couple dozen foreign countries, and the cost of serving them on a 24/7, 365 basis is so expensive. I have to look at valued partners like Eltropy and see where I can make a difference for them and for us, where their membership in InTouch Credit Union still possesses great value. And in those particular instances, I can't wait to be number 15.
I like that you see yourself competing with places like Chase. Because one thing that frustrates me with credit union CEOs, I'll ask, who's your competitors? And most of the time they'll mention a credit union down the street and a community bank. And I say, they don't matter anymore. Chase matters. B of A matters.
That is correct.
Capital One matters. These are the guys who will destroy you.
Yeah, that's my competition. I mean, that is my competition every day. And considering that I am just a fraction of their size, the only way that I could have any sort of relevancy with my members is to be able to partner with great fintech companies like Eltropy and to offer similar to not only best of products that they could get anyplace else.
And my best guess is that, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, I think Chase is spending more on AI than all credit unions together, which
Correct.
is a scary, scary, scary thing.
Correct.
So, Abhishek, how are you going to make this tool something that can compete with what Chase is offering?
No pressure. I think just to step back a little bit, I think one of the key things which we fundamentally believe is while we are at the front lines of agentic AI and trying to push the boundaries, it's not about agentic AI. Agentic AI is not the strategy, right? It's just a tool to achieve the business outcomes. End of the day, it's all about business outcomes. It's about getting that member experience, that the first call resolution, right? And that's what we latch on to. How do we actually go do that? And that's why we are very focused on how do we drive those experiences and drive those numbers up. So if the member experience is poor, yes, they are going to go to the competition, right? And competition is from these big financial institutions, even new financial institutions, right? Like the tech forward financial institutions. So there are many of these things, and the bar is continuously getting raised high. So what we focus on, end of the day, what do people care about, right? And we focus on even the Gen Z and early generation. What are the things they care about? Everybody cares about my member experience. They want their information at fingertips. Instant gratification is key thing. And that's what we want to deliver. So all our products today are focused just on that. So that's why we start with the member experience first with the trusted branded agents, right? Now what we're trying to do is take more and more of these tasks, more and more of the reasons they might call or ask a question, and try to make that done in the first go. When they ask for something or want to get that done, let's get it done first time. They don't have to call and call again. They can get it done in seconds and minutes versus days. So that's that. Once you start kind of raising the bar and delivering that service quality, that's when things happen. That's where the trust is reinforced, and that's where loyalty starts forming. And I think so. To us, we want to help our customers serve their customers better, right? So that's the mindset we operate in, and therefore all our products are thinking is basically we work backwards from that and build our products to deliver to that.
The other thing, Robert, I would say is that there are David and Goliath stories that happen all the time. The fact that B of A and Chase and Wells are so huge, it's like comparing a rowboat. Us to them is like comparing a rowboat to an aircraft carrier. Now, there are some things that an aircraft carrier can do that I absolutely cannot do in my rowboat, but I guarantee you they can't change direction as fast as I can. Yeah, there are some advantages of being nimble and flexible and small that put with the right opportunity and the right member and the right circumstance, but more importantly, the right experience, human experience, well, then you've got gold.
You're absolutely right. I mean,
You literally got gold.
Some years ago, I was talking with a very senior guy at one of the big banks. And I asked him, why the hell don't you have mobile remote deposit capture rolled out? And he said, because in one part of the country, we bought this big regional bank and I can get it to work in 40 states, but I can't get it to work in those damn states. And we can't say available every place except where you live.
Yeah.
And they eventually did address that. They did fix it, but it took them many months after that conversation. So
yeah, because everything isn't about size or everything isn't about price. I have that conversation with my staff all the time who laments that we lost out on member opportunity because of price and so forth. And so, our employees want to satisfy our members so desperately that they want us to have the best prices across the country 24/7. And I have to ask them, I said, well, let me ask you a question. They sell clothes at Walmart, right? Yes. Do you buy all your clothes at Walmart? No. Well, why not? Pretty sure you could probably get what you want and it'd be a lot cheaper. And I said, well, it's not all about price. I go, really? Really? Do you mean it's not all about, and I say the same thing about convenience stores. I used to work in that industry at one point in time. I worked there to help put myself through undergrad. And there isn't anything that I used to sell at my convenience store that you couldn't go to a full-time grocery store, not to mention a Costco or Sam's to get cheaper. But yet and still, it is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Why? Because it is not always about price. So recognizing that there is nuance in financial delivery is extremely important, which is why I believe there are times you cannot wait to be number 15 to 25 on the list.
Now, Abhishek, one thing that intrigues me about AI today is, I use a lot of these tools, and in the last, say, 6 months, Amazon's Alexa has gotten fantastically smart. Used to be dumber than dirt, but now this thing is really smart. Google has a similar product that I talk to occasionally, and it's great. Google's Gemini is terrific. Claude, just in the last 3 months, has gotten fantastic. Now, you'll say to me, well, of course they're getting better. That's because they're shoveling money. You're right. They're shoveling buckets and buckets and buckets of money. Can you keep up? In other words, to me, the bar with AI is a lot higher today than it was 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I was extremely patient. Oh, it doesn't know the capital of France. Well, neither did I when I was a certain age.
Absolutely. By the way, that's an excellent way of looking at it, because I think we are seeing AI grow up from a baby to it's to a toddler to getting into a teen, right? I think it's getting smarter and smarter, but I personally believe it's still tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to happen, right? And it's evolving every day. And the great news is we are actually beneficiaries of that. So we have made a very strategic decision early on in the company's history to not build our own models. So we don't go build out a large language models. What we do is we work with the best in class LLMs which are in the industry, right? And we continue to keep an eye on the industry, understand how OpenAI is moving, how Claude or Anthropic are moving, Google, etc. And what we do is understand what is the best one which is suited for our environment. So when we form our technology stack, we bring in some of these frontier models and we leverage them for the appropriate use case. So under the hood, we end up using these frontier models. So we are in the receiving end of all this innovation. So all the billions of dollars which is getting poured in, when these come out at these billions of data points which go fed into the LLMs, we actually receive the benefit. We understand that it's able to understand the queries better, it's able to reason better, it's able to execute better. And we leverage that capability and structure that up in a credit union context and with these safeguards and guardrails in place to execute better. So we don't have to keep up. We actually are on direct beneficiaries downstream from this innovation.
Wow.
Robert, there's a story I tell that I've told in the industry for a while that is very relevant to this discussion with respect to AI. And I tell the story about buying my mom her very first computer. And, she saw this was in the mid 90s and she saw how expensive they were. And growing up relatively poor, she's like, I don't want you to waste your money. And she said, she had this great idea. She said, why don't you wait until they've invented everything or almost everything and then buy it then so you won't waste your money? I said, Mom, it doesn't work that way. She said, why not? I said, well, think of it as a moving train. What's most important is not whether you're in the engine or in the caboose. What's most important is that you're on the train. Because if you're not on the train, you're going to get left behind. Well, that is kind of where we are, especially for credit unions. In talking about competing and relevancy and so forth, what's most important is getting on the train. You can have a discussion downstream, as Abhishek said, about what position you need to be on the train to give your credit union relevancy. But if you're not on the train, you're going to be left behind, which is the reason why there were well over 11,000, 12,000 credit unions in this movement when I started, and now we're down less than 5. That moving train is still that scenario is still playing out today.
That makes sense to you, Abhishek?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is again being grounded to solving business outcomes, right? Our technologies evolve, right? We're still after the same thing. And I think it's always in the pursuit of that excellence, we want to take the next thing on and be mindful how it can actually deliver to that. And that's the phase we're in. And it's rapidly evolving. We want to keep an eye on it. We want to ensure how this gets done and ensure we can actually put that in a high trust, high regulatory environment like a credit union and deliver to those needs. So absolutely, we are definitely on that train. We are actually pushing the boundaries on that train, but we are definitely benefiting from all the innovation which is taking place in and around us.
Keeping in mind, technology is an extremely secretive world, but as best I can figure out, Apple at this point has resolved to buy most of its advanced AI from third parties rather than develop it in-house. So you're not alone in this strategy. Right. And they're doing it for the very same reason that, we can go out and pay AI guys $10 million a year in salary plus a signing bonus, or maybe we can just buy some from Anthropic or from ChatGPT.
Well, Robert, my view is that just as technology is evolving, the environment and the space that we're living in is evolving now, and just like advanced technologies or advanced societies, we are going from a society of generalists to a society of specialists. What I mean by that is I remember growing up as a kid and my dad said, well, I wanted to teach you everything about cars and being under the hood because I want you to be able to change your own spark plugs and change your oil and and how you take care of the car and manage it. You'll not only develop some competencies, but you'll save yourself some money over the long run by being able to do all this work yourself. Well, today a car is more computer than it is machine. I couldn't do that today. In fact, you'd have to more than likely when you take your vehicle in, you have to connect it to a computer for it to tell you where it's off. So as we continue to evolve and rely more and more and more on each other, and we are becoming the society of specialists and not generalists, it is being designed in such a way that it doesn't make sense to hold everything yourself. You have to form partnerships with others in order to be relevant. I don't think you'll be able to survive any other way.
And this reminds me, so recently NVIDIA's CEO, Jensen Huang, explained it in this way, that AI, this technology is a 5-layer cake. And you may have heard about this. The layer number one is the energy, right? There's a lot of, innovation happening in nuclear and other sectors. Layer number two is chips, which NVIDIA, AMD, and others are solving. Layer number three is infrastructure. They are data centers of the world, your Amazon, AWS, Azure, so on. Layer four is your LLM models, the OpenAI, Gemini's, Anthropics of the world. The layer five is the applications. That's where it actually meets the world. It actually meets the users, right? That's the layer we are in right now. So if you look at the state of the industry where things are, there's innovation happening in every one of these layers, but the application layer is where we still tip of the iceberg, and a lot of it is going to happen. That's where we operate. We operate in that application layer. That's where we solve the problem for end user. We take all this investment, we take all this innovation, and convert that into value for end users. Right. So that's how I kind of see it. So everything which is happening, everything which you see in the news, which is across these first four layers, will be benefiting. Every application layer company is going to benefit from that.
Last question for you, Ken. It's if we talk a year from now about this, what will you tell me?
I will tell you that I was surprised at how much I didn't know and how much more advanced we are today. I will tell you that I did not realize how right we were in some areas and how wrong we were in others, especially when it comes to critical mass and critical adoption, because I think those are external factors that we can't plan on. They just happen. But I will be able to tell you that I'm glad I'm on this journey.
Where will you be, Abhishek?
Yeah, the similar answer. I would say, I, as a product manager, I always think about solving user problems and building products that our customers love. And AI is just a big enabler. It's a big crowbar, a big lever for me now to be able to solve that. So it's amazing because there has been problems which have not been solved in the past. Just the tasks we were talking about, it being able to reverse fees and so on. Why has that not been done so far, right? Because software systems, technology systems have been very cumbersome. And now we have a technology which can easily navigate through that, reason through that. And that's amazing because then you can solve all these problems and do things which have never been done before. So I'm also waiting for this pleasant surprise about all the things which are going to come and what value we can create for everybody as a result of that. And this industry, this technology is moving at a light speed. So every week or every month, there is something new to kind of think about. So that's amazing because that gives us more and more of these goodies to be able to go solve these problems. So that's what excites me.
Before we go, think hard about how you can help support this podcast so we can do more interviews with more thoughtful leaders in the credit union world. What we're trying to figure out here in these podcasts is what's next for credit unions. What can they do to really, really, really make a difference in the financial scene? Can't all be mega banks, can it? It's my hope it won't all be mega banks. It'll always be a place for credit unions. That's what we're discussing here. So figure out how you can help. Get in touch with me. This is rjmcgarvey@gmail.com. Robert McGarvey, again, that's rjmcgarvey@gmail.com. Get in touch. We'll figure out a way that you can help. We need your support. We want your support. We thank you for your support. The CU 2.0 podcast.